Hello there, Josh.
Well, hello there, Miss Hannah.
Are you ready to start our podcast?
I suppose so. So, basically what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the final chapter, The Things That Carried, The Lives of the Dead. And we each analyze two different passages. I analyzed the passage about Linda with a focus on sort of the nature of reality and its emphasis on memory while storytelling.
And I focused on the very last chapter, which is sort of a basis of it is the immortalizing of people through storytelling. So before we go into our passages and our argument, let's just give you guys a little summary of what happens in the lives of the dead. So we start off with Tim O'Brien at his first few days in the war, and they go on an air raid, and he finds a dead man who reminds him a lot of a girl named Linda, who was his first love when he was 9 years old. She died of a brain tumor.
Yes, and after that, it sort of goes on to talk about how she, Ted Lavender, and Kiowa, and anyone else who died will still live on through the stories they tell, as long as their memory is alive.
Yeah. So, just a heads up, Linda, too, is fictional, just like every other character, which really ticks me off.
It seems so real throughout the entire thing, which is really the talking point of my chapter.
So before we go into our different passages, let's just tell you guys what our argument is for this chapter.
Our argument was that Tim O'Brien immortalizes his characters through storytelling and bridges the gap between the war, which was unreal, to us, the reader, who are kind of average people, through the story of Linda as a sort of way to relate to us, as we all been 9-year-olds, and that the storytelling of a child with cancer is just so real that many people don't want to talk about it, and that's kind of what makes it real, as opposed to war. So let's get on to the topic of my passage about Linda. Now, before we even really get to Tim and Linda's story, we just wanted to talk about the nature of reality in the chapter as a whole, kind of. Even before we get to the topic of Linda, when they're looking at the dead body of the old man in the Vietnamese village, they talk about how the sight of the dead man is a bit too real for Tim O'Brien, as he cannot, go up and touch it like everyone else does. This, of course, reminds Tim of the sight of Linda's body, as described later in the chapter. Tim actually can't handle the thought of someone dying, and really can't look at the body. So that's why he makes up these stories about these people.
This also brings up the question, how can he immortalize people if he never actually looked at the faces?
Excellent question, Hannah, which is really addressed on page 225, when he wills into existence the image of Linda after finding her, seeing her dead body. It says that she's just a 9-year-old girl, something ageless in her eyes, not a child, not an adult. Just a bright, ongoing everness, that same pinprick of absolute lasting light that I see today in my own eyes as Timmy smiles at Tim from the grain photographs of that time.
This question can also be further answered in my passage, when he talks about Linda, and she's mostly made up with a new identity and a new name, like the man who never was. Oops.
Which was the name of the movie from earlier that we'll probably address later. So right now, I just wanted to address how real the entire story about Linda sounded. It was really as though you were telling a story from childhood as an adult. It was really interesting how he combined the emotional aspect with the reality of things in such a realistic way. Especially, on the way to his funeral and at the funeral. Even the drive on the way there, he describes his father's emotions as well as his own, how they, interacted with each other. And then the description of the body, how, quote, it didn't seem real, a mistake. The girl lying in the white casket wasn't Linda. So he tells the stories to get rid of that absurd, awful reality, and to cope with the memories that he has of that by telling either new stories or better stories to keep a sort of idealized version of that person alive.
I couldn't agree more, and this really ties into the sort of main idea of my passage, is that this storytelling is sort of a therapy for Tim O'Brien, because he's sort of just releasing these stories and he's not holding on to them, but he's also keeping them close and keeping them immortal for us and for him by telling all these stories.
Right, I almost thought it was sort of cathartic to relive them and then send them off.
we can tie this whole idea of immortalizing through storytelling when, in some of Josh's in his passage, where Tim O'Brien says, it was a relief when the movie finally ended.
Afterward, we drove out to the Dairy Queen at the edge of town. The night had a quilted, weighted down quality as if somehow burdened. That really relates to the nature of the book as a whole, in that he's sending this story out into the world, and that weight is, rather than all of it being on him, it's more dispersed, let out onto, like, the world around him.
And this correlates with something that I found in my passage. Somewhere in the story, Linda says, it doesn't matter that I'm dead, and it's true now, because these stories he's let go, and these characters he's immortalized, they're no longer dead. They have lives, they have families, they have new identities, as he says in my passage, they have new names, and now they're just sort of, they are memories, and they're strong, they're not dead, they're just alive in stories. So through all this storytelling and all this immortality, we get a better understanding of what this war was really like. And I think that's what Tim O'Brien is trying to get across to us with the story of Linda and all these fictional characters, is that even though this is a fictional book, this war did happen, and he did live it. And so this is real. And he's trying to, like, tell us through stories what actually happened.
That's a really interesting point, seeing the characters, like, lives not as immortal because they were real people, but like immortal concepts, maybe.
Yeah, that's a thing. I think that's what the thing he's trying to get across by putting Linda in this story.
Huh, cool.
It's all over for the unknown soldier.
So that was our podcast, guys.
Yep. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening.